Hi there! Welcome to the last Grown Up in the Woods. I'm Carly, and today I am doing a take video from Happily Ever Outdoors. And that is my 5 top favorite trips. Let's get started, shall we? My first one would be Tuya Provincial Park, and that's back when I worked for parks. And as far as we could tell, there was only one ranger who'd ever been in there, and they'd flown in the winter. So it took us a while to track down a good route in there. We only really heard of one person who'd ever hiked in there. The guide outfitters had taken horses in there, so we were just route finding the whole time. So off we go. It's 50 kilometers in, 50 kilometers out. We don't really know what we're getting ourselves into. So as we pulled into the trailhead, we were driving along an old dirt road, and I see a grizzly running alongside the truck. There was grizzly sign everywhere for the first few kilometers, but it was fall and completely beautiful. So our first day went off without a hitch. We hiked along a trail, we camped. Then 2 things happened. It started to rain and the trail became a lot less clear. So there were lots of stream crossings. We just gave up on being dry. And then we came out to this valley. We actually saw the cabin that we were aiming for. And it didn't look very far away. But we could not find any kind of trail through this valley. And it was just extremely dense dwarf birch and willow. You know, the whole time you're just untangling branches. So it took us 4 hours to go 1 kilometer. I think the most distinct memory of that trip was we were crossing this area that was just like hummocks of moss, big blobs of moss everywhere. We both tripped at the same time, and we just kind of laid there and laughed hysterically at ourselves because we were so incredibly exhausted. So I remember it for the exhaustion, but it was a very beautiful park. Isn't it fun how the hardest trips end up being the best ones in your memory? So trip number 2 was the Marsiangli River in Nepal. So when I was in Nepal, I signed up for this 4-day kayaking clinic, which is great. I learned a whole lot. And then they had this raft trip booked, and they needed to fill up a second raft so they could have someone to carry stuff. So I agreed to go, along with this other girl who was doing the clinic. This was about 2 years after the end of the Civil War, and the Maoists were kind of getting riled up, and there was an election coming up. So roadblocks were kind of popping up. So we came up to one of these roadblocks, and after sitting around for a few hours, they decided to let us through, and we gave a bunch of the Maoists a ride to the other side of the roadblock, and so there's about a few kilometers in between, and then we got to the other side, and they wouldn't let us out that way. So we turned around, and they wouldn't let us out that way either. So we were stuck in between these 2 roadblocks. Eventually, our guides managed to talk their way out of it and let us out. So we ended up just deciding to put the raft in below the dam and cut off like 2 days worth of our trip. So the dam was a run-of-rivers dam, which means there's no reservoir, and they have to change the water levels a lot to make things work. So we woke up and had our breakfast, and we started to get the rafts together, and as we were putting the rafts together, the water level dropped by about 1 meter. So we're essentially rafting through a creek. And there's dead fish flopping around everywhere, and finally we got ourselves all stuck on a rock, and we had to stand on a rock and wait for the water level to go back up. And then we came up to our class 5+ rapid, which the guides had really been talking up, and there were 3 people in our raft. We'd gotten a discount for going in the luggage raft. And we go through the class 5 rapid, and we're doing awesome, and then the raft tips up just about that way and dumps everyone else out of the raft and goes back down, and I'm left in these rapids with not much experience and no one to help me out. But that got sorted out. We all survived, and then we ended up only doing a day of rafting, and we went back to the other river, the Trisuli, and I just spent a few days doing more kayaking. Anyway, great fun. Great fun. For number 3, I was going to say that this was my first solo trip, but I realized that I've actually done I'd actually done some solo trips in Australia before that, but this was my first Canadian solo trip, and the first trip where I didn't see anyone else. So I went to Strathcona Provincial Park for a 3-day hike in fall, and the parks had cleared out at that point. Probably because it was snowing for a good portion of that, and when it wasn't snowing, it was raining. I tried to go up Mount Albert something rather. Anyway, I tried to go up a mountain, and it started to absolutely dump snow, and I decided to call it and turn around. But it was I guess a turning point where I was kind of like, yeah, I can do this stuff alone. I don't need a hiking partner. So number 4 is Stock Kengri in Ladakh, where Clay and I went last summer. So Stock Kengri was our first and only 6,000 plus meters peak that we did without a guide. It was a really long hike and really exhausting. It was just really special and really hard. Number 5 was another trip with mishaps, but not mishaps. This is in Costa Rica. I went to Central America with a friend, I don't know, 2008 or so, and I was staying for longer than she was, so she had a bit bigger of a budget than me, and she wanted to go into Corcovado, which is this amazing national park, and she decided to go on the tour, and I decided to hook up with a person from my hostel and try to walk into the park, even though there wasn't really much information about that. So we walked along the road until we found a decent sized river, and we thought, I wonder if this was the Corcovado River. So we started to walk down along the shore, and when we couldn't do that anymore, we started to swim. And we swam and we swam. We walked for a few hours too, so we were quite far in, and we didn't know where we were. We were swimming through this tropical river. We didn't have any supplies with us. And it was really cool. Just being in this tropical rainforest, swimming through this beautiful, clear, warm water. The river was so beautiful. So we had howler monkeys and spider monkeys and these little tiny toads that were about this big, hundreds of them. I thought they were flies hopping about. And yeah, I might have had crocodiles or caimans in it. But after about 3 hours of swimming, we're starting to get a little bit worried, because if it was the Corcovado, then we would have ended up at the beach and had a couple hours of walking back, and if it was high tide, we wouldn't be able to do it. When we come around this corner, and there's this guy in one of those sit-on-top kayaks, and he has this look of wealth about him, and he's like, where did you guys come from? And of course we're bedraggled, and it turns out that he was from the resort that was right next to the mouth of a river that was right next to the town we were staying in. So we weren't on the Corcovado River at all. And so we were back by dinner to meet my friend. So it all turned out awesome in the end, and it was a lot of fun. And that's it. Those are my top 5 adventures. It was tough to choose. And now I need to tag someone. The first one, I just got a sticker from him. Flying Squirrel Outdoors. I'm going to tag Boho Bushcraft. She's tagged me a couple of times, so I'm going to return the favor. I'm going to tag the Llamateurs. It's got a double L on it. I want to hear from Rob from Smetlogik, who's done some amazing herping trips, and travel small, live big, because they have travel in their names. So thank you, Will, for taking me, and now it's time for the question of the week. This week, I want to know why the dipper, also known as the water ouzel, is unique among songbirds. If you are the first to answer correctly, I will enter you in a draw to win a Cairn box after there's 25 names on the list. I don't know why I held up 5 fingers. 5 times 5. Okay, that's it for this week. See you next week-ish.